Welcome to New Mexico's Medical Cannabis Program, Compassionate Use and You, with Dr. Deborah Garcia. She graduated from the University of New Mexico College of Nursing, then went on to obtain a Master's of Science in Nursing, family nurse practitioner from the University of St. Francis. Dr. Garcia then completed her education with a Doctor of Nursing Practice, DNP. She worked at the University of New Mexico for 32 years. Additionally, she has been certifying New Mexico patients for the medical cannabis program for 12 years and is passionate about the use of medical cannabis for symptoms management. She recently accepted a position at the New Mexico Cancer Center, certifying patients for medical cannabis. Deborah was born in San Diego, California, and has lived in San Francisco, Seattle, and Albuquerque. She is well-traveled, but always remembers that Albuquerque is her home. Deborah has a son, 2 cats, and an adorable boxer. She loves to travel and scrapbook. Welcome, Dr. Garcia.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I want to talk to you today about cannabis, the medical cannabis program in New Mexico, and give you some background on the program and on cannabis. And so we've used cannabis for literally thousands of years. And then we've used it medicinally for about 5,000 years. And historically it's been used in all different forms, and coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, the same forms that we use currently, such as salves, teas, flour, and then they've even used hemp to make all kinds of clothing articles, and we still do a lot of this today. It's documented that the uses of cannabis thousands of years ago were for pain, post-traumatic stress disorder, arthritis, gout, and a quote is that quiets all pain and strife and brings forgetfulness of illness. And so that's pretty much how we still use it today. I think we understand a lot more. I know that I've had patients and providers say, what is it, like snake oil? It just works on everything and fixes everything. And we now understand why that is. What they discovered, even though we've used it for thousands of years, what we recently discovered in the late 80s is that we have what's called the endocannabinoid system. And it's a system in our body that controls, it's naturally occurring, and it controls things like mood, sleep patterns, pain perception, appetite. And there's two receptors, as you can see here, and they control different things, but the whole thing makes up the endocannabinoid system. And as I indicated, it controls mood, your appetite, sleep, pain perception, and gut health. So when you introduce cannabis to the body, the chemical structure of cannabis is almost identical to our naturally occurring endocannabinoid system. So when you put cannabis in your body, those cells, they attach very easily to our endocannabinoid system and attach to those cells and go to the same places that our endocannabinoid system already goes to. So mood, gut health, sleep patterns. So that's why it works. And then in the cannabis plant itself, there's over 100 cannabinoids that we are aware of. The two most popular that we hear about are the THC and then CBD. And I'm sure you've heard of these. And then there's at least 98 more. And you probably may have heard like CBN is popular, Delta 8, CBG. Those are all big, they're up and coming cannabinoids that are becoming more and more known. So the THC is responsible for making a person high, the psychotropic effects. CBD is really good for pain management, inflammation, and several other things, as you can see here. And when you use them in combination, which is what I often recommend to patients, is they work very nicely together and can manage a number of symptoms. So with the THC, there's two distinct plants, and they're actually different plants. One is indica and one is sativa. The indica plant is calming, relaxing. Patients they use it a lot for sleep. And it has more of a anti-inflammatory effects of it. Sativas, patients tell me, are energizing, uplifting. They a lot of people like them because it makes them feel creative and more focused. And as you can see in this picture, they are distinctly different in the plant. So they decriminalized medical cannabis in 1920, or they criminalized it in New Mexico in 1923. And then in 1978, they used it in New Mexico as therapy. And then in 1999, there was legislature to legalize it for medicinal purposes. It didn't become legal until 2007, when it was finally passed. 2019 is when they decriminalized it and made it a misdemeanor. And then in 2022, actually this month of 2022, is when they legalized it for recreational use. But we've been using it for compassionate and medicinal purposes since 2007. So we have quite a history of being able to perfect it in our dispensaries and the uses and the types of cannabis. And when it first started, it allowed there were only 10 conditions that were allowed for compassionate use. And then now there's 29 conditions. And then the whole program is managed through the medical cannabis program at the Department of Health up in Santa Fe. So the application process for patients is that they have to still be seen by a provider for medical purposes. Recreational is a totally separate part of it. And of course, anybody over 21 can use recreationally. So, but for medicinal purposes, the application process is that you see a provider, and if you have one of the qualifying conditions, then the provider fills out the application and submits it electronically to the Department of Health. And then the Department of Health then reaches out to the patient via an email, and the email will prompt them to finish the application process on their part. And once everything is done, then the Department of Health will issue a card, and they issue the electronic cards. The Department of Health sends a letter, and it looks very similar to this. And it really does give a patient an outline of what is expected, and it tells them all the instructions. I think the hardest part for patients is, especially us older patients, is that we can be challenged electronically. So I think that's the hardest part. But once they get that down, and I know at the Cancer Center, we help them patients get through it and get their applications completed. And then we also, the Department of Health is very good at helping patients to get through the process. And I always tell them, well, just find one of your grandkids or a kid to help you. So, but they try to make it as easy as possible. And so this is what the website looks like. And it prompts you to create an account with them. And then once you do that, you'll be able to keep track of how much cannabis you've used. Your card is housed there. You'll never have to worry about replacing it. Or I do have patients, even though it's readily available, I have patients that print it. They just like having that hard copy in their wallets. So the applications, I know for myself, I always submit them the same day I see the patient. And then they process them. They say to give them, I think the website says 5 to 7 days. I find they're much quicker than that. They process them. It just depends on how busy they are up there, but for sure within the 7 days. And they always give priority to cancer patients so that they can process them quicker. And I've had patients that get them the same day. And as I indicated, they give digital cards only, and they show up in your portal. And from there, you can screenshot it, download it, print it. And then this last, I just need to change. They used to have a recertification, annual recertification, and then a renewal every 3 years. And the state has done away with that requirement. There's no more recertifications, that you just renew every 2 years. And that whole thing was very confusing to patients and providers as to what the difference between renew and recertify. So anyway, that language is gone and you just renew. Purchasing cannabis. So legally, you can only purchase cannabis from a dispensary, a licensed dispensary. And as you probably know, there's a million of them. They're on almost every corner. And some have been around for a long time, and some have popped up just since we've gone recreational. So you can also grow it. There's no special license. It used to require a permit to grow, but anybody can grow it now. There are limits as to how much you can grow, and all of those are on the Department of Health's website. And then even if it were legal, it's illegal to purchase cannabis on the street. But even if it were, I caution patients from doing that. I would never recommend it, because you need to know what your cannabis is, what's in it, how it's grown, where it's grown. And when you go to a dispensary, they know exactly who their source is. It could be them, or it could be they purchase from other growers, but you know exactly who it is. They certify it. Often it's organic, and you know exactly what's in it. They have to have it tested so they know how much THC is in it, how much CBD is in it, and what the strength is. So there's a lot of benefits from buying it at a dispensary. So when a patient goes to a dispensary, it can be overwhelming, and literally you walk in and just everywhere, and so it's hard to know where to even start. And that's what the majority of my visit with my patients is to kind of walk you through that process and give you some ideas on where to start, because it can be like, what do you choose? So I usually try to give guidance as to what products, and the biggest piece of advice that I give to patients is to go low and slow and buy one product at a time, maybe 2 products at a time, just until you figure out what works well for you, what doesn't work well. And then once you know that, you can venture and mix and match and go into other things. But you just to kind of get a straightforward look at what type, if it's an indica, if it's a sativa, you know, just to try one, see how it works, and then add to it. And I rarely have patients who use flower, as in this top picture. I mean, I do have some patients that smoke and that's the way they do it. I think there's so many options that that's probably the last one. And to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of patients that use flower, but I do have some. So I think when you, I tell patients too, when you go to the dispensary, to go at a time when it's quieter, when you have time to go, and when it's not on the 420 weekend, which is a cannabis holiday weekend, and Friday night when everybody's there buying their recreational. And that way you have the time to speak with the staff there, and they'll have time to kind of walk you through it. They're really good. They call them bud tenders, and they're really good about guiding you and helping you through the process most of the time. And then the other thing is just to buy in small quantities. I tell patients, don't buy the Costco size, just in case you don't like it, if it doesn't work for you, if you want to try something else. And then it's also a good idea to keep a log of what you're taking and how much and how you like it. And that way, when you refer back to it, you can, you'll know where you were using cannabis. Low and slow, as I indicated. And then the nice thing about cannabis is it's totally customizable to you, and you can use as much as you need or as little as you need. That's why when you start out low, it allows you to go up or to stay the same, or to even go a little bit lower. So you can just, depending on, I have patients that will take a very low dose during the day for anxiety, for appetite, for pain, and then they'll take something stronger at night to sleep more, to control pain better. So it's just however works for you, and that's the nice thing about keeping track of it, so that you can use it and know, what you like, what you don't like about it. And then, of course, cannabis is like any other medication, and you have to keep it stored away from children, away from pets. It comes in so many varieties of unbelievable things. It looks very similar to cookies, candies, brownies, lifesavers. So you just want to make sure that you have it safe. These are some questions that I get asked often. Can you overdose? And the answer is yes. You can take too much. The biggest complication from taking too much is that you can get paranoid. You can have intrusive thinking. Your heart feels like it's racing, pounding out of your chest. And then often you'll go to sleep. The good news is that there's been no reported deaths from an overdose of cannabis. Again, if you use the rationale of go low and slow, you'll see what dose works well. Can you die from cannabis? As I just said, there's no reported deaths. And the caveat to that is that the Delta 8, the CDC has reported some deaths related to Delta 8 products. And the problem with Delta 8, it's one of the cannabinoids, as I mentioned, in cannabis, and it's being manufactured in who knows where. They sell it in gas stations, they sell it in smoke shops and those pipe shops, and so who knows what's mixed in it. Delta 8 in its pure form or in the cannabis form is probably an added benefit to, or one of the cannabinoids in cannabis that has a lot of good properties. The problem is that they've extracted it and then they make it into everything, and young people are using it, they're overdosing on it, they're people are making it with like I said, who knows what they're mixing it with. So they have had reported deaths, 2 or 3 reported deaths the last I heard. So you just want to be sure you know where your products are coming from, where they're sourced, and what's in it. And I say that all the time. I've said it for years. Don't buy your cannabis at the gas station. So caregiver applications, I do like to tell patients about this, especially patients who may be needing a caregiver who may or may not have one now, but think that they may be in a position where they need it. So a caregiver application can be filled out at the time of your visit, or if you need it later on, can be added to your application. And what that does is just allow your caregiver to act on your behalf. So they can purchase under your card, and they can go in and get the medicine on your behalf and legally carry it. So, and again, that process, it's pretty straightforward. The big thing I will tell you, though, is the Department of Health requires that you have 2 separate emails, one for yourself and one for the caregiver. You cannot use the same one. I'll often have husband and wives that share an email, and they won't allow that. It has to be 2 separate ones so that they can keep the application process straight. Will cannabis cure my cancer? I never endorse cannabis as a cure for cancer. And I know that you'll hear and read a lot of information about cannabis and cancer. They're still doing research. For now, there are no proven studies that it does anything to halt the progression of of cancer. So it helps with symptoms, and it's very effective with helping with symptoms. And right now, that's when I see patients at the cancer center, that's, I make it very clear. So immunotherapy and cannabis, as you know, immunotherapy is being used quite frequently. There was some concern that they compete and they work, differently, and so they didn't recommend anybody who was on immunotherapy to use cannabis. There's some new research coming out that it actually has no effect on the immunotherapy, and that the benefit of cannabis in the relief of symptoms of nausea, of pain management outweigh any kind of side effects. So there has not been a clear, definitive answer from the FDA as far as immunotherapy. I caution my patients when I do their cards, if they are on immunotherapy. Usually patients are using such a small amount that it doesn't make a difference. And so, but I do let them know, what the research had shown and what the concerns were. I get asked this a lot: can I have a concealed carry license? So this is a 2-part answer. One is that the Department of Health treats your information, your health information, it's HIPAA protected, and they treat it very seriously. So there's no shared information from the Department of Health to any other entity except for the dispensaries. They can pull up, your obviously they have your medical information. Not your personal medical information, but your card information in their systems. So that being said, when you do have a concealed carry license, you fill out the application, and there is a question as far as if you've used any kind of substance, and so it can be recreational or medical, and they don't care. They do not want anybody who's used any kind of mind-altering substance to apply, is from what my understanding is. So while the Department of Health or myself or any provider would not share that information, you do have to fill the application out. Can you travel with cannabis? So all New Mexico cannabis must stay in New Mexico. So no traveling with it. And there are states that have reciprocity, meaning that you can use your cannabis card when you go to that state and have the same benefits that their medical patients are able to. interestingly enough, the two most progressive states and leaders in the whole cannabis industry, Colorado and Washington State, and of course, California. So in Colorado and in California, you cannot use your New Mexico card for reciprocity. I think that's interesting. But I think they say when you visit our state, you pay our taxes, and their taxes are very high. So anyway, but in other states, I know in Utah, they have reciprocity. In New Mexico, we allow people to use it. So, and then remember that all airports are federal, so you can't carry any cannabis onto federal property, any airports at all. And that includes salves and edibles. And if you go downtown to the courthouse, if you go to the New Mexico, the state courthouse, you can have your cannabis. If you go to the federal courthouse, you can't have your cannabis. So when you're traveling, check the laws there and find out what they allow if there is reciprocity. I've had a few patients who've gone to Hawaii, and all I need to do is provide them with a letter saying that they have the medical card and that they'll need their medicine while they're there. And Hawaii lets them use them. So just check your law so that you can be ready when you go. So if you look at the conditions and you think you may not have a condition, talk with your provider, because you know, migraines are chronic pain, but it's not listed as a migraine. It is listed under, well, it's not listed, migraines aren't listed at all, but it does qualify under chronic pain. Insomnia, they just added last year. You know, some people are anxious and can't sleep, and so there used to be an argument for that, but in any case, they have added, and I think we're the only state that allows for insomnia as such. But in any case, they did add it last year finally, because that's one of the biggest things that it's actually the number one benefit that I hear about cannabis is that people sleep better. And yeah, and it's across the board one of the biggest issues that I hear from patients. So I often hear, can my primary provider submit my application? And the answer is yes, they can. They do have to fill out an application form with the Department of Health. And then once they do that, they're allowed to submit, and they'll get a login, very much like patients have their login information. Providers can do the same process, and they log in, and then they're able to upload and submit applications. A lot of providers will say, I hear a couple of things. One is that it's too cumbersome to do it, and it's confusing, or one that their facilities don't allow them to do it. So whatever the reason is, if they can't do it, there's a lot of providers that will do medical cannabis applications, and you can check with the dispensary. You can reach out to me if you need names, but just find a reputable cannabis provider who will give you guidance and educate you along the way. I did have a patient that was not in Albuquerque a couple of days ago, and for some reason something happened. She paid for her application and something happened and it didn't go through, and so she found herself in a position where she had to pay again. And it's unfortunate, but you know, that's why I said just find a reputable provider so that you don't find yourself in that situation. Most cancer centers, they have somebody who will help you through the process and help you get it. Exchange and trading. So it is perfectly legal in New Mexico to gift cannabis to anybody. Anybody can gift it, and medical cannabis. But you can't sell cannabis to anybody, and you cannot buy cannabis that's from anybody who is not in a dispensary and licensed to sell it. So, and then do you have any samples? Patients ask me that all the time, and I don't. So, let's see. Does anybody have any questions? I think I can.
Hi, Dr.
Yes.
Garcia. Yes, there's a question. How much training does the staff receive prior to opening their store?
So that's a good question. And there are dispensaries, because the medical cannabis program has been around for about 15 years. There are dispensaries that have been around that long. And and so what I tell patients is I give recommendations of a couple that I know have good reputations. And that's and that's not to say that other places aren't good. It's variable with the staff. Some dispensaries take their cannabis program, the medical cannabis program, very seriously and train their staff. Now, they don't go to a university. There are universities for cannabis training, but most of the time they don't, and they're trained in-house. So it's variable. What do I think of RSO? So RSO, Rick Simpson oil, or whole plant oil. I have patients that's all they use. And I have patients, I don't recommend it to people ever who are first starting, because it's extremely concentrated, extremely potent, and it takes not even a half a grain of rice size when patients can't tolerate it. And so RSO, I don't think it's good for somebody who's just starting out. I think it can be fantastic for patients who have a hard time controlling their symptoms as a source.
Are aromatase inhibitors immunotherapies?
I'd have to look up, because I don't know specifically. Yeah, I have to do some research on that, on the aromatase inhibitors, because I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head. Let's see, Martha. So are the trained dispensaries labeled as certified? I don't think there's any distinction. I think there are some. I usually, I'm trying to think of how to answer that. There's not a certification, but some do in-house, have providers and nurses on staff. And so I think that when you're looking for a dispensary, I would look for one that's been around for a long time, or that you go in and can talk to them about that and see how you connect with them. And then, can you take a combo of anti-anxiety and pain therapy? Do you mean cannabis for anxiety and pain? Is that what?
Yes, for gummies. Primarily, I was thinking of gummies for pain and for anxiety. You can combine those generally.
Yes. And often what you use for pain will also help for anxiety. It's the same. So it would be an indica is what I would recommend, and CBD for both anxiety and pain. Your pain, the amount you take may be different. Anxiety, somebody who's treating just anxiety probably takes just a smaller amount to keep the anxiousness down. And then for pain, usually patients take a little bit more.
So the CBD would be the indica CBD could be used for both pain and anxiety in the same dose.
Yeah, I would still, again, patients are often able to take a lower dose for anxiety and something stronger for pain. But it just depends. Everybody reacts differently. So I would say dose, if you're currently taking them or have them, I usually recommend patients starting at about 2.5 milligrams of THC and then increasing, going up from there. So that's a good starting point. And some patients, that's all they need. And then some people will take like 5 milligrams in the evening or just customize it.
And that's CBD.
THC. And then the
Oh,
CBD will either be 1-to-1. I even recommend that patients take higher, like 2-to-1 CBD to THC. So 2 times the amount of CBD, 1 time part THC.
And they can be taken together at the same time?
Yes, they're often sold in combination. Like the gummy has the CBD and THC in it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. How hard is it to get approved for a caregiver card? It's not hard. They used to do a background check. They used to have patients fill out, this lengthy application, and they've just done away with that. So now you assign somebody to be your caregiver, and then the state sends you, the patient, an email saying, do you want this caregiver? And you say yes, and then the state will put them down as your caregiver. You do have to state why you need a caregiver, but the process is very easy.
All right, well, I don't see any further questions or hand raising. So we'll go ahead and end this session. Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia, for being here this Sunday afternoon. We truly appreciate your speaking.
Thank you.